The views and opinions expressed on the show are those of the guests or hosts, and not necessarily those of the advertisers, networks, platforms, or stations. Warning that the content of the show may not be suitable for all audiences, and that viewer discretion is advised. The show does not intend to provide medical, legal, or financial advice, and viewers or listeners should consult with a professional before making any decisions based on the information presented.
Welcome back, everybody, to Paranormal Intelligence Agency Radio Live. I'm your host, Jack Carey, and we are broadcasting from 300 feet deep in an abandoned nuclear missile silo somewhere lost in the post-apocalyptic wastelands of the Dakota Territories. And I'm joined, as always, by the paranormal crime-fighting duo, Daisy and the Sundance Kid. We've been hunkered down in the silo, like I said last week, for a while now, except for we did venture out today, only to be chased by a zombie biker gang for miles and miles through the radioactive wastelands. And let me tell you, those biker babes were ugly. So, this has been a fun week, crazy week on the Great Space Roller Coaster. Lots to cover in our Paranormal in the News. Very interesting stuff going on. And I remind everybody out there that we are approaching the singularity, which is why I began covering kind of the transition of our old economy into our new economy. We're going to look at that from several angles. Cryptocurrencies, of course, play a big part in that and in our cyber prophecies. Always remember, I'm a paranormal guy, not a financial guy, so don't take any of my advice seriously unless you're hunting for Bigfoot. So, but, you know, the cyber prophecies, which come from the webbot, and my combined intelligence sources from 30 years of doing this, which come in on my personally developed intelligence stream, which I call the Shazbot. So we got the webbot and we have the Shazbot. I like mine better, but you know, Cliff High is still out there. Nothing big has changed in our cyber prophecies. Like I said numerous times, whenever you have an event that's been predicted by the webbot to occur, and it does occur, the events which are predicted to occur after that event occurs have a really high probability of taking place. So, and those predictions are what I've been covering for a long time now. They just keep progressing over the months. I started talking about them way back in the middle of summer, beginning of summer, saying that this fall would be a crazy, crazy time, that you could ratchet up the heat around the planet, you know, not literally, but, you know, I'm talking about geopolitical type tensions, you know, 50% easily. And that's what's taken place. There's all kinds of tariffs and trade disputes and things like that taking place, which, hey, we just came to the end of the line. No matter what you think about tariffs, we just can't sustain it anymore. 38 trillion in debt. You better do anything you can. You know, I served in the Navy, and I can tell you're at the point. I didn't serve on a surface ship. I was a underwater spy for the Navy, but I can tell you that you're at the stage now, figuratively speaking, in our economy, where you would typically, if you were on a ship taking on water, this is where you start throwing stuff overboard to keep it from sinking quite so fast. And that's what the tariffs are. You're just tossing anything you can overboard and praying to God that water doesn't come on the boat quicker than you can make it to shore. because that's really where the American economy is, no matter what anybody tells you. Our U.S. dollar is backed by our military strength and nothing else. That's it. You wrong us, you pay. Right or wrong, that's just the law. I ascribe to the law of the jungle of the universe. So, we live in a universe. I might remind everyone, we live in a universe, a reality matrix, where it is required of every life form to feed off of other life forms in order to survive. Never let that fact escape your attention, because therein lies a real secret of the universe. So, but we're approaching the so-called singularity. Fun times. The singularity is where you will see a convergence of all of the things I cover on this show, and you'll see how and why they're interconnected in the ways that they are. The universe, if you are a student of what the WebBot has produced over years and years of time, the big takeaway is that the universe is heaping complexity upon complexity upon complexity in an attempt to discover what we call novelty. In other words, it likes chaos because chaos creates complexity, and complexity offers the potential for surprise. And that's what it wants. It wants to surprise itself in the matrix that it created. So therein is why you have the construct of the universe the way that you have it. It is a self-revealing ontology. In other words, the same force that created all of the life forms within the universe has a built-in mechanism by which it will reveal its true nature to those life forms. And there's really not many roadblocks you can put up between the here and there that's going to stop it from doing that. Right? And that's where, our cyber prophecy of the world's attention and conversations and all of that turning to alien life and the idea we're being visited, and 3-Eye Atlas, which is all over the place. So we've been covering 3-Eye Atlas from the get-go. Since they first detected it. Avi Loeb over at Harvard, the famous scientist, was telling everybody that, according to his calculations, this thing appeared to be an alien craft. It's done some really funny things since then. It's, altered course. It reverse thrusted at one point. So as it came into the sun, it literally put on a reverse thruster and slowed itself down. Comets don't do that kind of stuff. It even prompted Elon Musk to put out a tweet that really freaked everybody out. So if you follow him on X, you'll know what I'm talking about. He talked about the reverse thrust that this thing just pulled off, and it just pulled off yet another really funky maneuver that it shouldn't be capable of doing. That is combined with double-blind targeting performed by the world's foremost remote viewer right now, because I think McMonagle's mainly retired, so that leaves Dick Allgeier as the one wearing the crown at the moment, and he was able to detect blindly that this object was actually being controlled by a tractor beam of some kind, for lack of a better term, from a very, very far off point in space. For whatever that's worth, whatever you can derive from that little tidbit of intelligence, that's If you can pull hard enough on that string, maybe the rest of the ball gives way, right? So all of these things are showing up worldwide in conversations, and they have been for a while, and the webbot predicted that that would be the case. This is right as you have an emergence, a convergence, if you will, of a change of our, well, not only geopolitical situation around the world, but the economic situation around the world. In other words, it's like the presence of Three-Eye Atlas finally it's like the straw that finally breaks the camel's back of the situation in totality. And when it does, you're going to begin to see the dominoes start to fall. And the dominoes falling are going to be really crazy to watch because, you know, the one thing that the webbot can't predict is the rate of descent in any crash. And, you know, it's always really wise to keep in mind that in any crash, whether it be an airplane or an economic structure, the rate of descent often dictates the totality of damage that's incurred at the end. So in other words, the hope is that the rate of descent is gradual, grind. The transition is made and you begin the gradual climb back up. That's much better than this, which is just a nose down to the ground, full force steam ahead till you plow into the earth and, you know, everything gets vaporized. That's a big, big difference. And that's really kind of where we're at, left wondering which one of those things is it going to be. It's a pretty competent team of people that seem to be in charge at the moment of the U.S. economy, minus the scourge that is the Federal Reserve. But that being said, 38 trillion's 38 trillion, and that ain't getting paid back. So whatever that means for you and your personal prediction for what the future may hold, that has to be part of your calculus. What happens when that doesn't get paid back? Because it won't be. So, you know, and on top of that, we're still borrowing. So you're talking about another at least 2 to 3 trillion per year being borrowed just to maintain our current lifestyle, and we've got 42 million people on food stamps that are about to lose all of those, you know, benefits because they can't even keep the government open. But the money machines are printing. You better believe that. Printing and printing and printing. There's somebody somewhere who is the man in the high castle, let's call him, has the parallax view of all of this and can see what's coming. October 10th, major flash crash occurred in the cryptocurrency markets. Some of you were probably watching that when it occurred. I was watching it because that's what I do these days. That's 90% of my time, and producing art to sell in the art world is the other part of my time. But art sales are brutally slow right now, so that's just the way it is. The economy is tough, and you know, art sells when people have a lot of disposable income to tap into. It doesn't sell otherwise. So but the flash crash was caused by somebody like the man in the high castle. That's the one thing they can tell. Somebody somewhere was able to see from their vantage point using their computer systems and all their little metrics and all their little, gadgets, that if they entered in a particular short position at a particular time on a particular token, it would begin a cascade of stop loss orders being tripped. And when that happens, it just keeps going down. Bam, bam, bam. And these guys, I don't know who they are, but there's a bunch of them out there in the cryptocurrency world that are traders that somehow came by vast amounts of money. And then on top of that, and maybe some of them were involved early on, they bought up cryptocurrencies when they were like 0.00013, of a dollar. And they just bought millions of them, and they eventually became something. And now you have these guys out there that are young. They've got millions of tokens, and they're not only that, but they are borrowing tenfold against that position and leveraging themselves that far out. That kind of stuff is why you get flash crashes. And somebody could see all of that lined up, and they just went dink. And they were waiting at the bottom to cover that short position, and they made hundreds of millions of dollars. Hundreds of millions of dollars in literally a couple of hours. So that's the kind of stuff you begin to see when one system is in its death throes and it's given out the death spasm, and that is the fiat currency world. And everything is transitioning. So many people are completely not educated when it comes to cryptocurrencies. And the quicker you can educate yourself on that subject matter, the better off your future is going to be. That's my personal opinion. There is no escaping it. There is only accepting it. And you might as well understand it at this point. Larry Fink, the head of BlackRock, which is the company that owns the world, as they say, literally owns the world. If you want to know who the big black entity is, the black house at the top of the hill, the 800-pound gorilla in the room on the planet, it's BlackRock. And the head of that organization said that last week on national business news, Fox Business Channel, if you want to look it up, said that he was in the process of tokenizing all real world assets. If you know anything about cryptocurrency, you'll understand that what he's saying is that everything that runs the world right now, all of it, all of banking, all of real estate, everything. Real estate alone is a $22 trillion market. Everything will be tokenized, and it all will be on the Ethereum network. There's a lot of good reasons for that. The main one is that Ethereum's never been down a day in its entire existence, despite countless attacks. That is why Wall Street says, that's a network we can build our rail system, our future system on, because right now they're using snail mail. Right now, transactions take 2-3 days to settle. Now they'll settle in 2 or 3 nanoseconds with no transaction costs. This will revolutionize everything, and that's just the beginning of what they're going to do. They're going to tokenize everything, like commercial real estate. You know, millions of people have never been able to buy commercial real estate. Now, when they tokenize it, you can buy a fraction of some commercial real estate, and you can be a part owner in it. That's what tokenizing does. It allows you to buy fractional ownership in various kinds of assets you could not do before. Even precious metals will all be tokenized. everything will be tokenized, and it will all be on the Ethereum network, at least to begin with. They're already building it out. It's a done deal. And those people that are behind the scenes in the know, like Larry Fink at BlackRock, you better believe they're accumulating Ethereum and Bitcoin. Bitcoin is great. Don't get me wrong. Bitcoin is, if you own a Bitcoin, you will be rich, period. It will go into the many, many millions of dollars. However, they're predicting Ethereum will actually overtake it in value at some point in the very near future, and then from there on become the really indisputable king of the crypto world because of its utility. All smart contracts, everything can be executed on Ethereum. Bitcoin is just a store of value. It's digital gold. It's no different than if you were buying physical gold. Ethereum is basically digital oil, and it's going to be the oil that makes the new economy work. You can think of it like that. So the webbot and the cyber prophecies are saying that the presence of this alien life form coming near the Earth is going to basically pop a little hole in the bubble that is our closed system, which includes our economy, and it's going to cause them to begin to introduce all kinds of back-engineered alien technology into our economy and into our industry and stuff because they have to. And that's how they begin. That's where real disclosure ends up taking place if you are a student of the webbot. And that's because they begin to do things like introduce zero-point generators into the national power system at certain points without really telling anybody. And simultaneously, they begin to leak out some of that technology to major corporations, allowing them to pretend like it was their scientists who made the breakthrough on it. That's what you're going to see. And when that happens, you have a natural transition from a fiat debt-based, really energy consumption-based economy to something completely different. And that's caused in the human species by what we would consider to be paranormal means, right? But tonight is our Halloween special. It's going to be Halloween this week, guys. And when we come back from our break, I'm going to discuss werewolves. Maybe not particularly the werewolves of London, but how about the werewolves of New London, Ohio? And we're going to revisit the strangest of all cases I've encountered in my 30-plus years of investigation, the Dogmen of Konawa, Oklahoma, and what might be a surviving, still thriving cult of shapeshifters who have somehow gone undetected in the pages of history, perhaps Native American in origin, not unlike the Skinwalker witches of the Navajo world, right? But we have to remember that Oklahoma is really, once upon a time and even today, Indian territory. It's my native state, and I had a Native American grandfather from Oklahoma, and he taught me a lot. But we'll get back to this discussion right after our break.
I'm Sarah, and this is my story.
I'm Ellen, and this is my story.
One night, I was at a bar.
I
was having fun with my friends.
I
had one too many drinks.
I
got behind the wheel to go home.
I got a cab to go home.
All of a sudden, from out of nowhere, a squirrel ran across the road.
It
happened so quickly, I barely had time to react.
The cabbie barely had time to react.
I swerved.
The cab swerved.
I can't believe it. I hit a guy.
I cannot believe it. The cabbie just missed a guy.
I wish I took a cab.
Thank goodness I took a cab.
You have the choice to save a life. Don't drive buzzed. It's a decision you'll never regret. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. Brought to you by the Department of Transportation and the Ad Council.
Rooms, dogmen howls, spaceships fly, portals, slip through, time slip wide, slip through live radio, mystical, airwaves, mystical, in the woods shadows creep, monsters leave. In the woods, strange voices. Shadows creep in the woods, monsters leave. In the woods, bright noises. Mystical. Airwave mystical. Mystical. UFO. Alien overlord.
From ancient times to modern days, legends of creatures in sudden disarray. Hear them speak through frequencies. Alien connections.
Break it out, truth untold. Tune it in, cosmic mystery. Dark woods where legends breathe. Paranormal whispers, can you believe? Bigfoot strikes through the veils. Dogman howls in the midnight tale. From the static, revelations pour. Portals open, dimensions roar. Starlit skies, echoes of the truth, no disguise. Cryptid shadows creeping near. Through the static, voices clear. Dark woods where legends breathe. Paranormal whispers, can you believe? It's the Paranormal Intelligence Agency Radio. Wednesday nights, enjoy the show. It's how we spend our Wednesday nights. Yay, yay, yay.
Paranormal Intelligence Agency Radio. I'm your host, Jack Carey, your tour guide to the Twilight Zone. I've got a face for milk cartons and a voice for smell-o-vision. And tonight we are talking about cyber prophecies. We're talking about cryptocurrencies, and we're talking about cryptid animals. So we got the 3 C's going on. And we're approaching, what I was saying was we were approaching the singularity. So you're going to see a time when our understanding of the construction of the universe and the intelligence behind it comes into a perfect alignment with that of the alien visitors. And at the same time, you're going to see a convergence of the paranormal world into our real world in such a way that really the webbot makes it sound like, you know, everybody's so enthralled nightly in front of their TV screens, seeing actual paranormal stuff happening and being reported by like mainstream news, like it's never been done before, in such a way that that's where their attention goes. You know, right now there's an army of guys like me out in the world that talk about these subjects so that you get the latest, greatest, you know, intelligence and news on any given subject, but dealing with paranormal stuff. But when you can actually see those events taking place and them reporting these deep analysis, of course, that's going to draw the public's attention really to their TV screens for prolonged periods of time. And that's really the future that you're coming up to. And like I said, you know, everybody should kind of be in the mindset of making a really comfortable nest where you are and hunkering down for a while, because this ride can get a little hairy coming up. There's going to be some real twists and some real turns that maybe none of us are expecting. So, you know, on the geopolitical front, pushing on all of this from the other side is the never-ending Ukraine and the threats coming out of Russia with their nuclear this and their nuclear that, and we got this and we got that. And, you know, it's not looking good. It's really not looking good. So that could go nuclear. On top of that, you're seeing the Future Forecasting Group just a couple of days ago came out with their forecast and their prediction, and they're reporting that at some point, as far as they can tell, before the end of the Trump administration, which would be 2029, China does take Taiwan. They're being forced to guard Taiwan, so you're running into a direct military confrontation with China if that takes place. So, and their readings on it were pretty scary stuff. So, you know, and it's one of those things you want to focus on, and you hope that the laws of probability change. There is a big meeting taking place today or tomorrow between the two leaders, and we'll see if they can forge some sort of friendship with each other that keeps them out of Taiwan for long enough that we can build our microchips here in the U.S., because that's really the problem. So 90% of all the microchips we need to even put into our weapon systems all come from Taiwan. That's the problem. So, and you can thank our globalist politicians for that. But, you know, just be wary, be alert, keep your eyes on the headlines. Know that 3-Eye Atlas probably is here today. They said it could have arrived. It might arrive sometime today, and we'll see what happens after that. The Webbot has some kind of a few scary predictions there. You know, it even spit out War of the Worlds as a sequence, but then it seemed to indicate that it was more a war of like conflicting belief systems kind of a thing. So interesting times. But we also live in a world where there are apparently real werewolves and these things we call dogmen. You know, I think that the dogman phenomenon now has to be framed within the frame of the dogman encounter, the seminal dogman encounter that occurred via the Skinwalker Ranch. I think that there's no way to discount that, and there's no way to overlook it. And until we come to terms with how and why that particular encounter occurred, and by examining that particular encounter, I think we'll gain insights into the Dogman mystery in a way that no other clue has ever left us before, if that makes sense. But in the course of my 30 years, I came across, or was actually given over a case from an actual private investigator, and involved a number of missing women down in south central Oklahoma. You know, there are books written about this place. This is Konawa, Oklahoma. There's a tombstone there. I've seen the photographs of those, but the cemeteries are kept quiet and they're on private property. But they say the headstone reads, "Murdered by Human Wolves." It is Catherine Cross's headstone. Online, if you do some research, you'll see that there's a number of so-called naysayers out there that say that, well, that's because she had an abortion. No, I did so many years of research into it. There is not a single other occurrence anywhere in North America where the term "by human wolves" was ever applied to doctors performing an abortion on a woman at that day and age. It was just never happened. And at the same time, in that same area, you have nonstop eyewitness accounts of upright running wolf-like creatures, bipedal and humanoid. And then on top of that, you have the late great Linda Godfrey, who broke the whole Beast of Bray Road story and really ushered in the knowledge of the Dogman phenomenon to modern day reading audiences out there. And that's why we have such a huge Dogman community out there these days, is all because of Linda Godfrey. And she published in her book, Real Wolfmen of North America, which I have in my possession. And Linda was a friend of mine, and I appeared on a number of shows with her. But she published in that book a number of encounters of people seeing either werewolves or dogmen in Oklahoma, all in that area. And in fact, it kind of forms a triangle. It goes from like Muskogee down to Konawa over to like the southeastern mountain Talahina area and back up to the Muskogee area. And that whole triangular area there is a extreme hotbed of upright canine humanoid creature activity, whether they be werewolves or dogmen or shapeshifters, right? And people are like, how do you know what the difference is between any of those three things? Well, it's actually quite simple. Dogmen, we believe as researchers that they stay in that dogman form that upright dog-headed form all times. That is what they are. Werewolves appear to have a genetic problem of some kind. They have a genetic lineage which creates the problem of them shifting into an upright canine-headed like creature, and that comes from European bloodlines. The modern-day cases of werewolves encountered in North America, when the final, person is actually identified as being the werewolf, most of them have Northern European lineage, which is very interesting. And then you have the Native American shapeshifter, which appears to be a form of witchcraft in which they're able to utilize dark witchcraft in order to shift into a canine-headed form of some kind. And that is the skinwalkers of Navajo legend. But that shape-shifting ability is also discussed in other Native American tribes, and Oklahoma was the place where lots of tribes were resettled. And who's to say that this particular area didn't possess or doesn't possess a group who are skilled in the shape-shifting ability of some kind? And I say that because the private investigator became so obsessed with the case of Catherine Cross and these other missing women that she actually moved to Kanawha, faced numerous anonymous death threats, was harassed by the local police department, was harassed by certain locals. She came across an eyewitness, a man named Michael Grayhawk, who I'm not even sure if he's still alive to this day, but he was able to tell her, and she relayed to me, that this Native American gentleman was near a water reservoir outside of Kanawha, Oklahoma, and saw a out of the woods on all fours. And he said that this was a completely nude male human, but the face was elongated like a dog's. And he said this thing ran on all fours so fast, it was incredible. Approached a big, wooden fence and was able to jump over this entire wooden fence in one bound. Interesting, right? So that's craziness in and of itself, that you have all of these nonstop sightings taking place. You have eyewitnesses to it taking place, and then you have the headstones saying murdered by human wolves. And this is a tiny, tiny little town. At the time when the headstone was put up, Catherine Cross's headstone was put up, there were fewer than 100 people. You're talking about 1907 in South Central Oklahoma. One little tiny dirt road leading into this place and one little tiny dirt road leading out of it, and who knows what could be there. Right? And then you have cases like the case in New London, Ohio, where it appears as though some people experienced a very real European werewolf. And his family, and this was reported to actual credentialed journalists, but this family moved to a cabin outside of New London, Ohio. And it's interesting that it's New London, Ohio, right? Like the werewolves of London. This is the werewolves of New London. It's very interesting. But they moved to this cabin, and it's kind of in the woods, right on the edge of the woods, basically. And they begin having creepy stuff take place. The husband worked at night, and the wife would catch glimpses of a face in the window, right? like somebody's standing there looking at her, but just a glimpse before it's just gone. Like it can move so fast, it's just not there again, you know. And it happened a number of times, and the husband kept thinking she had to be crazy. And one morning, it snowed the night before, and he was coming home from work, and it was still dark outside, 5 a.m., 4 a.m., and he pulls up, and he can see in his headlights giant footprints going across the roof of the house. And he gets out, and then he goes over to the edge of the roof where the prints stop, and he looks around to see where this thing jumped, and this thing had jumped 20 feet off the roof of the house. Bipedal, large wolf-like prints. And he calls his brother up, and he's like, man, I think, you know, something really weird is going on here. Why don't you get your shotgun and let's go see if we can track this thing through the woods. And they track it. And this is after weeks of occurrences taking place on their property, right? And they follow these footprints for a really long way through the woods. And eventually they come to a clearing, and there's this old welded shackle shed. And the footprints lead right up to the door. And they know the thing is in there. And they walk right up to the door, and the brother-in-law starts to yell. And the husband of the wife had all this stuff going on, is like, no, let's go before police show up or something like that. Something's not right here. Something weird is going on here. And they go back, and they start asking around town, and eventually they find somebody that's like, oh yeah, you know, old Dave lives in that shed. He has for years and years and years. They're like, who's old Dave? And they're like, he's the old man that works down at the tire shop. He changes the tires. He has for years. That's all he's ever done, is change tires at this tire shop. And he lives in this old shed out in the woods, and that's it. He's never been married as far as anybody knows. Nobody knew his history other than he was an immigrant from Romania. Very interesting. Well, they go down to the tire shop to get a glimpse of this guy. And it's like they reported that it was like this guy sensed that they were there. He was in the back room that was kind of dark and not lit where he did the tire changing, and he wouldn't come out. And they said they could see him at one point kind of stick his head out and look at him from the shadows, and they said his eyes were yellow. Crazy, right? And so they just leave, and they're kind of freaked out by this whole thing. And they're like, what the hell is going on around here? And sure enough, a couple of weeks later, old Dave dies. And they had subsequently told the sheriff what was going on. And they saw the sheriff driving down Main Street, right? And he stops right there in Main Street, and he's talking to him. He's like, yeah, you know, old Dave died. I'm on my way over there to take a look in his shed if you guys wanted to come along. And so they did. All three of them go over to old Dave's shed, and they open it up, and there is just an overwhelming stench of dog. Just so bad it almost knocked them down, right? But they've got to take a look. So they walk in to this little tiny shed, and this guy had taken sheet metal and rivets and had literally sheet metaled the entire inside of this shed with rivets. And then he had attached 2 chains to the wall And the only thing in the entire shed other than that was a jar sitting in the corner, and it was full of silver dollars. It was almost like he went home every night. He chained himself up to keep from shifting, and he used the silver to help him do that. Right? They looked at the walls. The walls had deep gashes in them, and sheet metal. Insane. So it was determined by this couple that what they had actually come across was a very real werewolf. And we have to remember that in mythology and in folklore, there is always a kernel of truth somewhere to be found. For those of you who are students of the Dogman phenomenon, look up my book. It is Dogman Legend Meets Science. It details really what's necessary right now for us to obtain indisputable evidence of dogmen, and it goes through many different theories of what they could possibly be as a species. So take a look at that. That's out there on Amazon. And like I said, you know, even the cryptid world is going to be displayed in the singularity. You're going to see finally an end to the Bigfoot mystery will take place. That's going to take place along with all of these other dominoes that begin to fall. Already you have shows like Expedition Bigfoot. I've spoken a few different times about the fact that they are a CIA-funded television show. And when the CIA puts money into something like that, they are bound and determined to achieve their end goal, which appears to be Bigfoot disclosure. You can't compete with that kind of funding or that kind of availability of the latest, greatest technology that you can get out there, which is what they have. And, you know, even the guy that they send around to interview their eyewitnesses says former CIA operative right underneath his name. So, you know, Bryce, the head guy of that show, really has CIA written all over him. They operate like a CIA operation. They employed a specialist field biologist, and they have a ground operative in the gentleman that does the tracking. All of that's CIA textbook. That's how you would run an operation like this, using the AI algorithms that they're using to tell them when and where to go in order to have these encounters. So all of that is going to feature prominently in the next few years. And right now you are in this major transitional phase. I tell everybody out there, be prepared. If you can, do what you can to secure precious metals, secure crypto, and even, you know, I hate to say it, but you might think about putting aside some other types of supplies for the future. So, because things are going to be interesting. We get to the other side of this whole thing and things are going to be amazing. You'll have what's called sci-fi world emerging, and with that, tons of opportunity for the human species to actually really blossom as a species and as we are ascending in the Kali Yuga planetary cycle. So join me next week, guys, and we'll continue down this path on the Great Space Roller Coaster. I'm your host, Jack Carey, and stay tuned for the wonderful Nancy Planeta on Vixen's Vault.